What's up, everyone? So today we have a pretty awesome question. It's like there's a bunch of stuff around the question, and I won't really read that. I never do. I try to skip that because it's just commentary. But it's a quick question. What is Gray Dragon? I know Green Dragon is an alcoholic weed drink, but I can't find anything on Gray Dragon. Maybe it's because I'm from the UK and this is US slang for something. It's a super niche thing. And it's so, all right. So for those of you who don't know, it's like if, let's see, I don't even have any cups or anything. One time my desk is clean. So it's like if I have a pint jar, okay? Now in this pint jar, I have alcohol, right? And you can do this with vodka, you do this with moonshine, do it pretty much. I would suggest vodka or like Everclear, try to get like a really strong alcoholic drink. But you would take it and, if you had a pint, you would empty out, half of it, let's just say, for example. And you would take cannabis or hash and you put it in the jar as much as you want. And this is really a personal preference thing. You want to fill it, if you still have space in the jar, you want to fill it up and leave like a little bit of air at the top and seal it and let it sit for like a week and then take it out and shake it again. So you want to do about 3 weeks. If you make it 4 weeks, do 4 weeks. And then at the end of the day, you take that, you open the jar, you filter it. So pour the alcohol out into a funnel, use like cheesecloth or something like that to strain out all of the flour that's in there. And then, squeeze the cheesecloth, get all everything that's in there out. And then that's trash. Like that, you can throw that cannabis right in the trash. And the reason for that is because what we just did is we took all the THC out of that bud and we put it into the alcohol. And with that, it's called the tincture. So now all that alcohol has however much THC was in that cannabis is now in that alcohol. So now if we took that alcohol, we could make a drink with it. We could do whatever we want. Here's the cool thing though. So let's say we have, I don't know, let's say we still have our half a pint. Okay. Half a pint of liquid. So we have this half a pint of liquid. If we want to make this so that it's even stronger. So let's say, I'm just going to like give a ridiculous estimate. So when I say 3 grams of like crystals, like keef, is, was in that and we extracted and we have like 3 grams of THC or whatever. That's definitely not what it's going to be, but whatever. With 3 grams in it, that would be the dosage of it, right? So if we let it evaporate halfway, so we have a quarter of a pint, now the dosage is twice as strong. So now, if it was 3 grams and let's say we had, that half a pint was, I don't know, 6 shots. If we let half of it evaporate, now it's 3 shots, it's less alcohol, but the THC is going to be twice the dose, twice as strong because we let it evaporate, right? Now, if we let it all evaporate all the way down to a single shot, it's like we take that one shot and it's like we smoked that cannabis, but it's more like we ate it. But, and basically when you drink THC, it goes, especially when it's an alcohol, it goes into your bloodstream quicker and it's different. It's like the difference between smoking and eating something. That high is different. And it's the same thing. So now that we understand, a tincture basically is just when we use alcohol to extract a certain substance of value out of another substance. That's it. Super easy. We want to make our tincture stronger. What do? We let it evaporate. Why? Because it's alcohol. It evaporates super fast, right? You take some rubbing alcohol, wipe it on your desk. Watch how fast it evaporates. Do the same thing with water and alcohol at the same time. Watch which one evaporates quicker. My money's on the alcohol. So that said, it makes it really great if you want to do this. So now that's what Green Dragon is. I used to make Green Dragon not by putting, flour into it, but I would make isolator hash. So I would, out of my trim and all that stuff, when I was growing cannabis, I would take that stuff and I would throw it into these bags called isolator bags. And I would put real ice cubes in it. And at the end of the day, I'd pour water in it. And I'd get a paint mixer and I'd mix the crap out of it. And what happens is it beats all these, all the THC, all the crystals, fall down, and they go through these silk screens at the bottom of these isolator bags. And then you pull each screen up. The first screen is like 220 microns, and then it has like all your, your leaf matter, all your stuff. Now, before you do that, you freeze it, and it makes it so like the THC or the crystals snap off like icicles, right? So it makes it easier to extract THC using water. And basically I would do this, and it was a really easy and clean and effective way to make high quality hash at home and reuse all my trim so that I'm not just throwing it away. I'm making money on my trim, on the stuff that I take off that's not, actually flour. So I do that to increase my profit margins. Then when I made the hashish with that, I would take that hashish and I would make edibles. Now my edibles are really strong because I'm not using, flour can range in THC percentage from like 2% to, I think Chem Dog was the most, like 32, I think, percent THC was the craziest numbers that I had ever seen. So it varies, but depending on how potent it is and how much THC it is, how much THC you can extract, kind of basic logic here. So when you have hashish, usually that's like, 50 to like 86% THC. So it's much, much purer than the 1 to 30% that you're going to get with flour. It's a lot more concentrated. And the cool thing about that is stuff like chlorophyll, the stuff that's in the plant. Whenever a lot of people make edibles, they do a really bad job at it. And, you'll have like a lot of stuff will taste like chlorophyll, tastes like plant, so when you make edibles with hash, you don't have any of that. There's no chlorophyll, and it's all been purified by this ice water ahead of time. So it's a lot easier to do. And like when I made like a batch of cookies, for example, like a regular batch of like sugar cookies, I'd make sure that I cooked it. It was like under 340 degrees, I think, is the temperature that THC would start to bake. Don't quote me on that. I'm probably been a while, since I made any edibles. But that would, that's how you do it. And you make sure you keep it under a certain temperature and you bake them. But that's a whole nother process. I'm getting way off track. So going back to it, we, with the tincture, we're extracting something. So when you do it with flour or bud, you're taking out that THC. However, Gray Dragon is when you are doing this same thing, but you're doing it with psychedelic mushrooms. Okay. So I always mess up the pronouncing this. I want to say it's psilocybin. But in hallucinogenic mushrooms, what we would be extracting would be the chemical psilocybin or psilocin. Like I always mess it up. One is the chemical that makes you trip, and then when you ingest it, it turns into another chemical, and that's actually what makes you trip. But I digress. So we're just going to call it psilocybin. So we're extracting that psilocybin with our alcohol. We're doing the exact same thing. So I would take, let's say, an ounce of mushrooms. Okay. I take this ounce of mushrooms. I'm going to grind it up in a coffee grinder that hasn't even used it for coffee before. I'm going to grind it up. So now I have this ounce of like powder, right? Because they're dried mushrooms. And I just pour that into our half pint mason jar. Fill up the rest, like I said before, leaving a little bit of air. Put the cap on, same thing. Shake it up, put it away. Take it out a week later, shake it up, put it away. Again, when you're done after the 3 weeks or 4 weeks, take it out, strain it, okay? throw that, ground up mushroom matter away. That's gone. That's trash. Now what you have left is this kind of disgusting looking, it looks like dirty water. But it's pure alcohol with psilocybin, and it's an ounce of hallucinogenic mushrooms worth. So, like, again, and if you wanted to make that stronger, it's like we just open up the cap and we let it evaporate, and now it's like we get to a point where we can put it into like a needle that doesn't have an actual syringe at the end of it, but we put it into a needle, and it's almost like, okay, I've let this evaporate so much that 2 drops in the back of my tongue is going to be like eating an eighth. But there's no nasty taste. Like it gets absorbed into my bloodstream super fast. My stomach doesn't get upset. A lot of times when you eat hallucinogenic mushrooms, your stomach gets upset because they're poisonous. They're bringing you to the point of death. That's why you're hallucinating. And people are like, oh, that's craziness. I'm like, yeah, dude, okay. Like, if you like, you hear the story about like, a kid going to see grandma and grandma's dying in the hospital, and what's grandma say? Oh, there's grandpa who died 10 years earlier. There's grandpa, and and she's hallucinating because she's knocking on death's door. So like that's what you're doing when you're hallucinating on mushrooms. You're dying, and your third eye's open, and like you can see shit that you normally can't see. It's like you can look at music and taste colors, and it's just some really crazy stuff. And there's different levels to it. There's like there's 7 different levels to a mushroom trip, and they're all categorized. I think it's shrooms.us or shrooms.us or something like that. There's a site with a trip calculator where you can say, okay, this many dried mushrooms, what level will my trip be? And you can actually plan a trip on mushrooms based on the weight of the mushrooms and like your weight and all that other kind of stuff, and then see like the actual 7 different levels of trip. So at the end of the day, like it's just a more efficient way of ingesting them. You don't get as sick. It's like, it's a lot easier to, put, if I get a nip, okay, like a nip jar, and I fill that up with Grey Dragon. If I'm like, hey, like, let's all trip on, shrooms and we're all going to eat an eighth together. Like if I have an ounce, I can be like, okay, each one of these nips is, I have 8 nips, and, an eighth is 1/8 of an ounce. So, I'm going to take this, half pint that I have. I'm going to put X amount, just by dividing it. I'm going to put X amount of milliliters into each jar. And then you can top it off with a fruit drink or what, if you even want to, you know what I mean? And then it actually tastes good to eat. If anyone who's ever eaten hallucinogenic mushrooms, they taste like shit, they're disgusting. So it's kind of nice, you trip better, you have a cleaner trip. It's like, so that's what Grey Dragon is, to answer the question. So, like on the Darknet, I had made 1 or 2 batches of Grey Dragon. It really wasn't a big thing. The biggest vendor I've ever seen in my life, who did the whole hallucinogenic mushroom thing, was a vendor called Trip with Science. He's been busted. Sucks. I seen he got busted recently. But he did this. What he did, he did the whole everything I just told you about. He made Grey Dragon, and then he just he made it and he put it into little vials, and he sold those vials. And he's on there for a little bit. And it was really dope. But people loved him. I mean, every review I ever seen, any market I ever seen him on, he always had amazing reviews, a super loyal following. And that's all he was doing. This guy was just taking mushrooms, grinding them up, putting them in alcohol, waiting a little bit, straining them out, and putting them in these little glass vials. It's easy as hell to mail out, So to answer your question, that's what Grey Dragon is. I used to make my Green Dragon, like those silk screens I told you about to making the hash. So any of you that have a grinder for cannabis, if you have a screen for that grinder, what happens after like a month if you smoke every day? It gets clogged. Like so much THC gets on it that it gets clogged. You got to scrape it off. So if you were to take that, screen or that grinder, like once it gets like almost tarnished, because it's got so much THC in it, you could take that, get some vodka, throw that thing in the vodka and scrub it with a toothbrush, and the alcohol will dissolve that THC and it will clean that grinder like brand new. And at the end of the day, you're not wasting your keef. You're getting every single bit of your keef out. And now, like, you take a shot and, you're going to get high, and you're, if you're lightweight, you might catch a buzz. Like, it's something like you could turn around, you could drink that, and you would, if you were to drink, like, let's say you drink half a pint, you get drunk. If you drink half a pint and, you had a good amount of keef in there from your grinder or whatever, or some bud, it would be like, maybe smoking a joint or a blunt. Except you're just drinking, so I think it's very cool. And I mixed the two. So I made green and gray dragon and combined them before, which is really cool. But I used to use it for I keep getting sidetracked. For my silk screens, I used to put them in, I used to get this big metal bowl, like the big mixing bowls, and pour some moonshine in there and stick my silk screens in and go. And it would clean them so there was absolutely no keef on them. And that makes it so you can reduce the hash a little bit quicker. But yeah, so that's what Gray Dragon is. It's pretty awesome. At the end of the day, one of the things I wanted to do for a while was to do that same thing, but to take, and I'd never heard of anyone doing this ever. So you have hippy flipping, which is like when you eat mushrooms and you take ecstasy. And then you have another type of flipping. I forget what it's called, but it's acid and ecstasy, I think. But so hippy flipping, I was going to make hippy flipping pills, and it was going to be the Gray Dragon, like we talked about, right? But I would take like a quarter pound and stick it in, right? And let it, boom. And then when I let it evaporate, though, I'd let it all evaporate. Okay. And then now I have like a quarter pound of mushrooms, and I'd scrape the sides. And when I'm scraping, after it's dried out, is psilocybin. I'm going to have, a couple 100 milligrams, probably a very little amount of psilocybin out of a quarter pound of mushrooms. I'm not going to have very much, but it's super powerful, right? So like I need a milligram scale, and, I would weigh out 3-4 milligram hits, and that would be like, that might be, I don't know what it would break down to because I never ended up doing it, but that would be like the equivalent of like, say, an eighth, right? Now I take that couple milligrams and I mix it, with some pure MDMA, and, then I press it, or, then I mix a little bit of THC in it, and then I press it with some, pill binder and some shine cut. And that's, how you'd make an ecstasy pill that when you take it as pure ecstasy, and you mix some caffeine in there to that's why, people like when they take ecstasy, and they sweat and all that stuff, it's because a lot of times there's caffeine in the pill too, or amphetamine. Like you never know what people cut ecstasy pills with to be able to press them. I know a lot of people, I've heard in the past, people like, oh, they cut it with heroin and cocaine. Like, listen, that's nonsense. Okay. At the end of the day, like, do you know how much heroin and cocaine cost? They're expensive in comparison to, like if you're trying to make money on pills, like no one's cutting, their ecstasy pills with cocaine and heroin. It's just, it's an idiotic assumption. Like they're going to use something much cheaper, like amphetamine, or caffeine, or, pill cut or shine cut or pill binder, which is what makes pills stick together. All that kind of stuff is what they would end up doing. But like I want to make this pill, and it was like a hippy flipping pill. You take it and, you could roll on X and, trip out at the same time. Instead of having to eat mushrooms and do it like that. And I never got around to it, and I'm glad I did too, because at the end of the day, like the feds, like you have a pill press in your house, feds hate that. They immediately assume, he's making counterfeit fentanyl, pills and marketing them as OCs, and Just, and it's a lot of work, unless, I mean, you get a pill press for like $125 on eBay, but like if you're going to do it for real, then you need to go out and drop $7 or $8 grand on like a decent pill press that's going to crank out pills, be able to do like the measurements properly for dosages, and it's too much work, for me. I had enough things going on, I could barely handle what I had going on. So anyways, I hope that answers your question. If you guys got value out of this video, hit that like button. If you're not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. And if you guys have any questions or, have different views on things, definitely leave them in the comments. I love hearing back from you guys. And I will see you guys in the next video.